Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 172. I'm here with Julius Tolentino. Julius, how are you?
Good, good. Thank you for having me, Kyle. I'm a fan of the podcast, and so I appreciate what you're doing for all these band directors, and it's a great resource.
Well, I mean, I would say the exact same thing for you, right? If anybody has heard the Newark Academy Band, then they know you're one heck of a teacher. And I saw a blog that you did a number of years ago, and it just really hit home with me. And it was, so we've used it for the title here, Programming Substance for Festivals. So before we get into your bio, when you talk about substance, what are you referring to?
When I talk about substance, jazz music is, it's all music. There's a history to everything, and really, I think when we program for our students, it's like one of our biggest tools that we can use for good, hopefully, and that it's important that we're picking music from the large canon that jazz music has to offer, and we're dealing with, the big band era. There's just so many pivotal big bands that we can choose from, and I think a lot of times, from what I've heard in the past, and even going to these things in high school, band directors would choose music maybe because it was a little less, maybe because it was more limited, but now there's really no excuse to not play music with substance, and they can get sucked into the game of, reading a description of, this is a great festival opener, and, it has a saxophone solo, and, it's a rhythm section feature, or it's, this and that, and this music is literally written for high school bands or middle school bands to, to be purchased, to have those, those things, those elements, and it's less about the music. So, and nowadays when you have access to music of Basie and Thad Jones and Duke Ellington and Charles Mingus, I think it's really important. It's one of the most important things I think we have as a band director, to really allow our students to deal with that authentic music and that authentic sound, and try to get it as much as possible through the repertoire that we're playing.
Part of what we'll do here as well is talk about some charts that are of the easier variety, because a lot of people who are teaching, younger bands might say, well, we're not at that level, but there is so many charts, I should say, that are adapted for young bands. And I'll just point people to, it's off the top of my head, episode number 151 with Michael Sweeney. He's probably, in my estimation, sort of the best writer when it comes to taking classic jazz repertoire and putting it down for younger students.
Yeah, that's so true. I use a lot of Mike Sweeney with my middle school bands and groups.
So let's get into that. You teach 6 through 12 at Newark Academy, but I'm going to give a little bit of longer bio, and please correct me if I mess anything up. So you're a saxophone player, student of Jackie McLean, and you've played in many big bands, including Illinois Jacques Big Band, Basie Band, Ellington Orchestra, the Christian McBride Big Band, and more recently, the Mingus and Roy Hargrove Big Band. Okay, so that's like all the big bands. You consider yourselves equal parts jazz musician and jazz educator, and you've been teaching at Newark Academy, a small private school in Livingston, New Jersey, for 17 years. You're currently a professor at Princeton University and Montclair State University, as well as a big band director at the High Jazz Academy for Jazz at Lincoln Center. More recently, Newark Academy, and if anybody has not heard Newark Academy on YouTube, please do it. You'll be blown away. Has Jazz Band has placed first in the NJAJE state finals for an unprecedented 13 years in a row, and your group will be making their 7th appearance at essentially Ellington in May. So, question: when you started at Newark Academy, I didn't prep you for this. Was this program existing and up and running in its current form?
There was a part-time jazz director here at the time, and I was replacing him for a full-time position. But my first top group, my select jazz band, the audition band at night, was like 1 trombone, 1 French horn, 2 trumpets, 3 saxophones, and like 2 guitars and a full rhythm section. So definitely started from humble beginnings. And, by the next year I had a full ensemble, second year, and then third year is when we started going to festivals and competitions. And then, it's just built on, year after year. And I think, there are a lot of reasons why it's kind of a well-oiled machine now and kind of builds upon itself. But I think the main point that I kind of figure it out early on was you have to build a culture around the music.
100%.
You know.
I love that. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was literally writing down the word culture as you did that. And I remember being a young teacher and seeing a teacher who'd been teaching 30 years and had a program similar to yours who was, everything was, it seemed like a well-oiled machine. And I said, I wanted that. And he said, that's great. It takes time. Just do a little bit every year and it just grows and grows. And that culture is really huge. But what I love is that the culture's around the music. You know, there's other things that are important too, but the music has to be center.
Without a doubt. It's so true because when you build a culture around the music, it doesn't just affect the students in the program, and it becomes bigger than the school. Even I've had so many band directors reach out to me all over the world. Really, we just had a band from Australia visit with us this year, and it's really because of the music. The kids are playing on such a high level, and I get a lot of questions on how to do that, but it's really the kids' dedication and their love for jazz music. They really, our school, they love the sound of Duke Ellington and they love the sound of Basie, and the Mingus band is a big impact on them too, and they really they listen to it, and it's fun when you hear see a little middle school student in study hall listening to Giant Steps. It's definitely a thing at the school, so it's pretty cool what we've built.
I love it. So when we hear of a program like yours that is sounding fantastic, and a teacher like you, and this is not uncommon too, those programs that are amazing, competition is not what they care about. It's about the music, right? So one of the phrases you wrote in your blog, and where can people find this blog if they want to read it or check out your website as well?
Yeah, jtolmusic.com, and there's a little section for blogging. I definitely have to update it, but pretty much all the information is there.
Yeah,
hopefully more to come.
It's
more
great.
To come.
It's great information. So we wrote here, you wrote, teach students to reach their full potential versus teaching them to win the competition. So can you walk us through that a little bit? That people might say, well, that's easy for you to say, your band's killing. Well, I assume you had this approach and that's why they're killing, is it because it's about the music? So yeah, can we expand on that a little bit?
I mean, I think a lot of band directors do this where you focus on, the process, right? You're focusing on how, every rehearsal, how to get a little better, how to get deeper into the music. And I tell them, it's not really, it's fun to be recognized for things, but that's not why we do them, right? We do them for the sake of the music. Our goal is to sound like the Ellington Orchestra and the Basie Band. Like we have goals musically that we're trying to achieve, and those are really the goals. We're trying to sound like a professional group. And I firmly believe that you can do that with a high school band, because I tell the students all the time, like, yeah, we're sounding professional, but I play in bands where we do this without rehearsal. So you understand that we have a lot of rehearsal, and I think that's why it's achievable, because we have rehearsal time, and professional bands don't have that much rehearsal time. You're on the road or playing gigs, and that's how you form your sound. But it's a luxury to have rehearsal. I tell these students we have to, the band room is a sacred place, and we should just relish all the minutes that we have in this room together and take advantage of them while we're together, because it's what makes us, what makes any program special.
Can you give us a rundown of sort of what does the year look like for your jazz students? I know each group is probably a little bit different, but for example, obviously there's like the essentially Ellington stuff that they're going to perform in May and all that. And but throughout the year, what does your program look like for the jazz kids?
Now it's the point where at the end of, usually middle of May, we start preparing for, because that's when all our concerts are done. If we make Ellington, fortunate to make it, it's done by the middle of May. So we're already preparing for the next year at the end of May, with the top group at least. So they're already sight reading tunes for the next year, for the submission possibly. We sometimes we do perform every year at the end of the year for the school year. So we're preparing for that too, for the last day of school. And then, in the summer, hopefully they're working it out. So maybe some of them are TAs to my summer camp, or they're doing other camps. But I'm expecting them to, really know all their music, at least the ones that I've given out by our first rehearsal. And last year, we actually did make essentially Ellington. It was a big hit for the students. They were really, really torn up about it because, we just had such a great band and great seniors, and they were so determined after that point that I never had a band like lift themselves up and just be like, okay, it's all right, we're going to get them next year. And they started, we had a rehearsal in the summer, and students really, I'd never done that before. We never had that kind of student leadership where it's like, no, we're going to rehearse in the summer and get it together. So there's no doubt we're going to make it this year. And we're going there next week. So the prep is getting intense, and they're really sounding great. But that's for the top group. I mean, in the beginning of the year, we actually do auditions in April. So we slot the audition bands to 3 bands, the top group, the second group, and the third group's like a lab band, doesn't really have performances or festivals. And then, September we have a new schedule, so we'll see how that lays out, but I think it's going to be better. It's going to be longer for us, which will be nice. Our program we have a 7-day cycle now, where we're going to be 4 days a week. But in those 4 days a week, that top jazz band might do a sectional or break out once as a group, but usually it's like all the kids that are involved in the jazz band who are also involved in the wind ensemble. So it's like pretty much 2 days of wind ensemble, 2 days of jazz. But it's more of like a super jazz band. It's like we call it upper school jazz band. So it's in the program. And I'm very lucky to have my own middle school, be my middle school feeder. So I work with the 6th and 8th grade. So I get them going pretty early on, kind of just getting the feel of the music in 7th and 8th grade, and playing, appropriate repertoire that really still has to do with the history of the music, but getting them to just all improvise and just have fun improvising and seeing who really takes to it. And I kind of take tabs on everybody and kind of say, okay, this kid could really be one of our star soloists in the future. So I make sure they have, the resources they need to kind of keep growing. And by the time, they get to high school, there's like a lot of mix in the second band of middle school and high school kids. So by the time they make the top band, they're already kind of knowing what the deal is. And obviously it's a little bit more intense, but they kind of get that feel, because I also do the second band as well.
So as a school that has improvisation as the center of their jazz program, right? I mean, to be a jazz player means to be able to improvise. Talking with your younger students who are still new to improvisation, or if you had band directors in front of you who are still working on getting their improvisation culture improving and happening at the school, what are some things, or how do you approach it on a daily basis to make it just another thing that we do? Now, you mentioned it, like there are kids who will be star soloists and kids who will be more like section players. So not every kid needs to be burning, but yeah, every kid should be able to blow on blues and rhythm changes, and right. So how do you approach that?
Well, I think one of the secrets I have, I teach this at the Band Director Academy at Jazz and Lincoln Center. I have a process and show them what I do with the students. Usually we do start with a B-flat blues, and just learning that blues scale. And I show them how to use the blues scale correctly and not just like jump around the scale, and so they get the sound of the blues in their ears. But then also having them all improvise. And I've heard some people talk about this on your podcast. Well, all improvising softly together, so nobody feels like they're out of place and like really put on the spot. And then, just have fun with it. It's okay if they're making just, not even playing the right notes, just encouraging them at that age, just to kind of have the courage to kind of take a solo. So that's what it is in middle school. And just doing that a little bit every, not every rehearsal. I can't say I do that every rehearsal, but I like to do more of it. But I think I definitely put a focus on kind of, getting the music together before we can really delve into that. And then the kids that really want to do it will study privately, either with me or take one of my jazz improv classes, or with their teachers. And all the private teachers that we have in our after-school music program are hand-selected by us, the band directors, that kind of go hand in hand with our program. So that's another kind of secret to how we can kind of get things rolling quicker.
I love that you mentioned encouraging, because I think the worst thing you can do when kids are still new to improvisation is criticize them, or even critique them. Yeah. Like, whatever you play, I'm just happy. Even if you're not swinging, for now, I'm happy. Just keep them. So for me, it's kind of like when you know that they're confident enough that they will solo consistently, that's when you can kind of turn on the critique, especially when they're in front of their friends.
I don't even say I would really even critique them at that point. I kind of give them more information. I'm very much I talk about a lot of great jazz educators now are using this term language, which I learned from Jackie McLean, and he always talked about the language. And Tatum Greenblatt, great trumpet player friend of mine, talks about learning jazz improvisation as a second language, which I think even takes it another step, and it makes a lot of sense. So I give them pieces of the language. I call, it's funny because you come to one of my middle school concerts or high school concerts, you'll hear the middle school kids playing like the same lines, and then the high school students are kind of going nuts for them because they learned those lines when they were, in middle school. And there's like a little 2/5 that I'll show them, and they put in the right spot and sounds good. I explain it as like these are opening phrases. Like if you're learning a language, this is like my name is Julio. Mi ama is Julio. So it's like they're learning their first phrases and they're putting it in the appropriate. It's just like a worked out conversation that you're having in a second language, which you do in class all the time. That's the same thing that we're doing with jazz music, but with jazz phrases. So once they kind of hear where those opening phrases are, right? I give them a solo. I specifically give all my saxophone soloists Lou's Blues by Lou Donaldson. This is his first Blue Note record. It's a great simple blues based on Charlie Parker's language. It's super soulful, super swinging. And if they can because he doesn't really double up. He doesn't play any double time. It's really great melodic ideas, and students can usually transcribe it. And if they can do that, there's a little line there that hints at the harmonic minor going to the 2 chord. So then all of a sudden they hear that do dee dee baby do, and they're like, I just say, see, that happens in that bar. If you can do that when you solo, you're really saying something a little extra right there. And so it builds upon that. And once they kind of get those sounds in their ears, and all the lines I give them are based on the root of the chord in the beginning, because I'm really trying to form in their ears, hearing notes as functions. You know what I mean? So when that's the flat 7, that's the flat 5, that's the flat 3. I hear that over the chord now, and then that becomes a sound that becomes instantly part of their language. So when they listen to Sonny Stitt or Hank Mobley, they can relate to that language.
Yeah.
So it's building like certain solos and just building it up, and then and if they can do that, then they're really probably on their way to getting to that next level.
I love that. I just wanted to do a quick shout out. There's 2 other EE band directors who have been on the podcast too. If people want to go back and check those out. So Chris Behrens from Beloit, right, was episode number 107, and Aaron Bush has actually been on a couple times. Most recently, 134 from Foxborough. You guys are friends.
Yeah, very good friends. Great band directors, and Aaron comes from the Steve Massey School, who's like one of my idols. And I've known Chris for a long time. He's been at Ellington I don't know, probably at least a dozen times already.
You were mentioning earlier that you're at the Band Director Academy, the Summer Academy with Jazz at Lincoln Center. For people who are hearing about that for the first time, what's that about?
Well, when I was saying building the culture around the music, I really heard that phrase when I went to my first Band Directors Academy. I was sending in tapes. I wasn't getting to Ellington yet, but I felt like I was getting closer. They said my submission was close one year, and that they wanted to offer me a scholarship to go to the Band Directors Academy. And the Band Director Academy, I think that time was pretty new. And Steve Massey was one of the directors that was there, and Wycliffe Gordon. It was an incredible experience. Ron Carter, who was no longer with us, he recently passed away this year.
Yeah.
The educator saxophonist. It was not that I just learned a ton, but it was also reaffirming on the things that I was already doing, because I didn't really have too many people that I could turn to yet, at that point in my career. So hearing a lot of the things I was already kind of was doing instinctually as a jazz musician was really reaffirming. And then, and that's when I think, we took that next step forward. It's a great resource. They teach you about all different, some of these concepts we're talking about now. I teach a jazz language class usually. We talk about middle school repertoire, high school repertoire. We talk about how to get the rhythm section swinging, all the mutes for the brass instruments. It's just everything you want to kind of get into as a jazz band director, have questions. And at the first day is like everybody just asks questions, and we put them up on the board. We kind of answer all those questions by the end of the 3 days. And I've been a participant in the past, and I've been I don't know if I'll be there this year, but I've taught there for several years with, and usually it's Rodney Whitaker, incredible educator and legendary bassist, and same with Terrell Stafford, wonderful trump player and one of the best educators on the planet.
So, what is the role of music in your program or your advice to other band directors that is not traditional jazz music? Take away all of the stuff that we would consider of substance, right? All the other stuff, maybe newer charts, maybe funk charts that are not steeped in tradition. So if band directors say, yeah, but there's other great charts I want to play too, like what's your advice to them about when they could use those?
Right. I mean, I'm fine. I think it's also a matter of taste. You know what I mean? If somebody wants to play Timmy's Tacos, funk chart, so be it. It could be a great chart. You know what I mean? But I think the thing that rings out to me is it's more than the notes. It's more than the music. It's like, what is, you know, what is the history behind this music? And we can just do so much more with the music when we think about it that way. If we talk about Billy Strayhorn and we're talking about A Train, or we talk to the students about this Black American man that was a gay American man in the 1950s, outwardly gay, and making this partnership, having this incredible musical partnership with Duke Ellington. There's just so much behind the music that we can talk about whenever, talk about Art Blakey and his life and what he did for jazz musicians and all the musicians that came out of his band. There's so many stories to tell through these musicians. So I think that's one aspect of it. I mean, if you're playing a chart by written somebody that's literally for high school bands, there's not really, to me, there's the substance. That's what I mean by the substance. The story's not there. But I think it's fine playing those charts. I mean, I have no problem. And I rarely do that. I can think of maybe one or two charts that I've, one that comes to mind is Base of Operations, is a Brian Kidd arrangement. It features baritone sax or a bass. I just thought it was a great swinging bassy-esque chart that has a great melody. And I met Brian a couple years back, I think at Jen, and told him how much I love this chart. And in that way, it's really cool too. You can meet some of these composers and arrangers. But even now, like if I were to do something like that, I would probably play music, of composers that I know that are real, great musicians, like Mike Mossman, or, whoever it may be, David Gibson, trombonist, that wrote a lot of the charts for Ware Hargrove's big band. There's just a lot of other young working musicians that are writing music of substance.
Yep.
So there's, for me, that's my go-to. I don't, it's not even like I really think about it. And I don't dog anybody out for playing what they want to play. That's everybody's taste and prerogative, and it's what they know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, go out there and try to know a little more, I guess.
I love it. And so let's go to sort of like festival programming, right? So say you're doing, here's 3 tunes that I want to use for said festival. I would, my encouragement, we haven't talked about this at all, is if you have a festival in March, don't do just 3 tunes all year to get really good at that for that festival, right? Like, have a wide variety of music that you can do as much, even if you don't start meeting till December and you only have like a 3-month jazz, like even if you're that program and you meet twice a week, that's fine. Get 5 or 6 other like easy swingers so you can teach concepts throughout and you're not just working on those 3 tunes. So kids don't think jazz starts and ends with these 3 charts. That being said, the typical programming that when you and I were growing up, and people still do a lot, is like a strong concert opener, a ballad of some kind, and a Latin tune at the end.
Right.
So that can still work, right? If that's what you want to do. But Terry White always tells me the middle tune doesn't have to be a ballad. It can just be something that's different. So, we look back on those days fondly. I mean, I remember working on hard tunes for a really long time. They're grade 6s, but these days is a little different.
Yeah. I mean, I think the age we're in jazz education wise is the age of authenticity. Shout out to my man, Todd Stoll from Jazz Link Center. I don't know if he coined that phrase, but I heard him say it. And, so, the days of having to do a ballad and the Latin. I think you're right. It's kind of like, as long as it's varied and different. I like to go in. Obviously we're if it's not essentially Ellington and it's another festival, I do like to keep working on Ellington and play that set. So I'll play at least two or three from the Ellington set that we're doing, and usually they're varied anyway. And then for me, I like to take a hard left and play, Tower of Power or
Hmm.
or a Mexico tune or Tito Puente and mix it up in that way, and or even a Michael Jackson tune, something that just is very different than what we did, just to show the variety that we can actually do. I tell band directors all the time, if your band can play Duke Ellington, you can play Tower of Power
Yeah.
because it's all in there.
What percentage of your repertoire would you say is swing? Like, I've talked to a lot of people, and I happen to agree with them that the majority of what you teach should be swing, but then there's
Mhm.
also as other as well. So,
Yeah.
you agree, disagree?
I mean, for me, I agree. The ground rhythm of jazz music is swing. And that's like kind of the hardest, concept to get across to the students. In the beginning. I mean, now like my students, my students are really swinging. So it's actually harder for them to play wind ensemble music sometimes because it's a little reversed
That's
where we're
funny.
at in your. And I'm always telling them, no, we cannot phrase the top of phrase like that. This is not jazz. You don't play it that short, and the
Yeah.
eighth notes can get a little sometimes. So, but um, but yeah, I mean, for our program, a lot of it is swing. But even in just you know swing, there's up tempo swing. There's swing with brushes. There's ballad swing. There's two feel. So just even there's like a popcorn beat I like to call it. Like there's so many different feels when it just comes to swing. It's not just straight dang dang a dang, So there's that concept of it, and I do like to do more, a couple, Afro-Cuban pieces and definitely playing some funk pieces in there, just trying to change things up. But I would say definitely most of our repertoire throughout the whole program is there is a lot of swing that we're dealing.
I've said it a bunch of times, and I want to get your take on it. That so
Yeah.
when people hear their jazz band and they say, "Okay, the notes and the rhythms are right. Why don't we sound better like those upper bands or the professional bands?" And to me, assuming your rhythm section is not blaring out the horn section, that
Yeah.
articulation is usually the devil's in the details there, right? So for people who are not really sure on jazz articulation, that's a huge subject. So I'm kind of throwing you this softball that can be hit in 1,000 different
Yeah.
directions. But yeah,
Okay. Okay. Well, a couple things. So I I feel like I try to lead by example at these festivals, these local festivals, and we play as acoustic as possible. Okay, so the piano has to be mic'd in these big auditoriums. My students, we don't all. Sometimes we'll bring an amp, but it's very minimally used. Usually, we don't play with an amp. We never play an amp in rehearsals. We don't play an amp on my stage. We go to the festivals. We might bring an amp and practice a little bit with it because they're just. I don't trust that. I never trust the sound person, and even as a musician, I don't really like to deal with sound people, right? Um, but with my bands, my high school bands, would rather just go to acoustic. So if there's microphones set up for the mic for the saxophones, or even like, and there's like maybe one in each section, that's the worst. You know what I mean? Because like all the balance that you guys worked on in the band room is just shot, and I hear it all the time when I go to these festivals. I'm like, why are you using the microphones? There's an option to not use the microphones. So I just make sure the piano is balanced with the rest of the band. And that's the only microphone I use unless there's a vocalist, and I'm building up my solos to be able to solo over a big band without using a microphone. And the saxophones don't need the microphones because then it wipes out all the articulations that even if you're getting to that point where you're really thinking about the fine details at a festival, it's just gonna you're not gonna hear any of it. And all the judges, when they hear our group, I think that's the first thing that stands out because it's like a refreshing, like it's just so refreshing to not hear amplified sound, you know? So that's the first and foremost. I feel like if you can just go in there and make it an acoustic set, you're gonna sound better than most of the bands because I can't think of one other band that's doing that, and at these state festivals, and it's just like I don't know. That to me, that's like a given. I think they're just worried about them not being able to project, but that's why you give them those experiences to say, okay, you got to learn how to project on the bandstand. And it's usually the saxophones that have to project over the brass, unless you have a weak brass section, which my second band, that's sometimes what I'm dealing with. But that's first and foremost. I think I was always confused with this because I also learned jazz articulation is tonguing the top note, what I mean, into the you know ta into a slur, do da do da do da do da do da do da do, and that is definitely a thing that I do as a musician and play in a section, but that's not my for me, that's not my go-to when I teach jazz articulation. I try to teach my students to articulate every single note, and I start clean. I start like I don't want to say clean. I start off with like the bass being kind of playing more even, like Bird or Sonny Stitt, you know what I mean? Or Hank Mobley, like just an even, or like Train, it's very straight. So I'm thinking about articulating every eighth note equal, because if we can get them all equal and even, and learn how to maybe peak the top, then we can add articulations and really control the sound of the section or our solos with what we want to do with the tongue. And then when you play fast, yeah, you tongue a lot less, and a lot of times it is every other that's the way you can kind of get that phrasing. But like when you're phrasing in a big band, I tell students all the time, you see these slur marks and phrase marks, those are not slurs. In wind ensemble, it's slurs. In jazz, it's a phrase mark. I want you to articulate every single note, because when you can articulate every note, you have control over the rhythm. Everybody's a drummer, so everybody's thinking about the rhythm. If you can accent, whatever you want to accent at any given time, that's what makes it special. If we can get everybody on the same page doing that, it's an incredible sound.
Okay, so you've been doing the Essentially Ellington submission process for a long time, but for the band directors who maybe have never done it before, could you walk us through sort of that process, maybe from their point of view, but band who's never done it, why they should consider doing it and what they get out of it?
Right. Well, I think it's a great way to get feedback on your group, and one of the amazing things, but the most amazing thing about the program is you get charts for free every year by applying, or just you don't even have to actually apply. You can get these charts from Jazz at Lincoln Center. Their library is vast. It's not just Duke Ellington; it's other pinnacle, jazz musicians, composers, Mary Lou Williams, Benny Carter. So there's a lot of great charts that are available, and they put about 6 to 8 charts out every year that you get free. So that's probably the main reason to do it. And then submissions are due in January. And you can, what I tell directors to do is not only apply for the competition or festival, because why not? Even if that maybe not is your aspiration right away, apply for it. And then there's another aspect where you can just get comments. And so like, luckily this year we made it, so we got our comments right away. And then I think if later on they have other great clinicians listening to the tapes and giving you great critique on your submission, and that's another great reason to do it. Also, I think a great tool for any band director is recording your groups. I record a lot of rehearsals, but actually having like a studio session where we're really intently trying to record for a festival or a different competition, or the Downbeat Awards, something like that, it's a great resource, and definitely kind of I think allows the band to become their own best teachers as well, because they're hearing back these playbacks, and I think that's some of the most growth that we ever do is listening back to playbacks, and by the next time it's like so much better if their chops are still holding up. So doing several recording sessions I think is a great idea.
I just want to jump in on the recording thing. I am 100% a band director, like most who are listening, who do not record enough. I do record, but not as much as I should. So that's something I'm continuing to work on. But I've noticed when we have a recording session planned, we'll do a few of them, but the band is so much better at the recording session than I think. Like they know they're recording. They've practiced extra hard beforehand. You're right. It's like they're like on steroids when it comes to their brain power. They're trying so hard. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's the best. It really is. So that's one of the, yeah, it's exactly what you said. The awareness, and then even in the recording session, listening back, it improves by the minute. It's just a fun process. It's intense, but it's fun. I also plan my auditions like that. I have the auditions right before our last big concert, so the students are practicing all the time. They're trying to improve for the next year, and it helps with the last concert too. But essentially, Ellington, yeah. I mean, what happens if the state, I think, is divided into several regions, and so they take the top 15 bands from all over the United States and Canada, and you get to go to Jazz Lincoln Center, and before I even made the festival for the first time, I think it was in 2012, I want to say. I took my band the year before to see them, and that was before it moved to Jazz Lincoln Center. I think it was still in Avery Fisher Hall, and it was incredible, just to hear the level of these groups and their access to the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra was incredible. Meeting Winton, and the whole nine. And then when you're there, it's just like there's nothing equivalent to this on a high school or even collegiate level. They roll out the red carpet like nothing else. There's like a cheer tunnel at the beginning of the year. There's this gala at the first night where people are sitting with members of the Jazz Lincoln Center and different kids from all the United States on their instruments, having dinner together. There's a jam session that night, and then the festivals, and everything follows that with all the press and things. It's an incredible experience. Definitely life-changing for a lot of students, and I'm sure a lot of directors would agree with that. So, I mean, it's definitely a goal.
Yeah. So for any Friday Brain, for any teachers who want to know more, right? How can they reach out to you?
They can reach out to me, through my social media, jtolmusic.com, or jtol on Instagram. You could DM me, or my email, which is just my name, jtolentino at newarka.edu.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.